Now, on the vaccine front today, it's important you get to see these numbers as well as the other COVID cases and everything else I talk about every single night, because data matters. Now, again, the politics here is that supposedly this thing's a giant failure. Well, have a look at this. 25 million people live in the country. More than 9.1 million doses of the vaccine have been administered. That is up about 50,000 in the past 24 hours. Now, there is no help here from the people who help advise the government and thus the chief medical officers and thus us about which vaccine is okay for you. There's a group called ATAGI. It's the group that basically, as well as the Therapeutic Goods Administration, can decide not just whether a drug is legal, but for whom the drug is best given to. Now, their advice has been up and down, dare I say, like a bride's nightie, because have a look at this since the start of the pandemic. When it came to AstraZeneca, there was advice about people who are under the age of 50. That was then changed to people who are under the age of 60. And it's changed again. Because you see, ATAGI have not been fully focused on the dangers of the vaccine. Instead, what they have been doing is playing a rather interesting game. And the advice that they have swapped and swapped and changed, which of course has led to vaccine hesitancy, led to doubts around AstraZeneca, and led to basically that particular vaccine not being wanted by a huge swathe of the population, is because ATAGI has been making decisions not about the risk of the vaccine, but the risk of the vaccine proportional to the number of people with COVID or those that have died as a result of the pandemic thus far. Let me explain. Now, Australia either is in the best of both worlds or the worst of the best. You get the point. You see, in Australia, there has not been a huge rush of people to get the vaccine because there hasn't been the huge amount of cases or deaths. It's only when there are lockdowns, like the one that took place in Melbourne and the one that's happening in Sydney right now, that actually forces people to get off their backside and rush to go and get the vaccine. Because you see, unlike the United States, where 400,000 people died and 4 million people had an interaction with the virus, let alone the UK, where again thousands of people died and many hundreds of thousands ended up getting the virus. In Australia, we have not had the cases. So understandably, it's a little difficult to expect people to go to rush to get a vaccine for a thing that they have never met somebody actually having. Now, I know that it displeases some people in the audience for me to speak positively at all of vaccines. Well, too bad. The vaccine is the way out of COVID jail. You know that, I know that. Is there a perfect rollout? No. By his own admission, the Prime Minister is saying we're about 2 months behind where we are. But think about this. Would you prefer a country that had a slower, imperfect, but getting there vaccine rollout, or a country that had a wonderful vaccine rollout but had thousands of deaths that helped motivate people to get the vaccine? The idea that ATAGI is changing its advice, and today's advice is simply bewildering, because this is as clear as mud about whether you're in your 50s, 40s or 60s. This is what they said today. In context of the COVID-19 outbreak, where the supply of Pfizer is concentrated, adults younger than 60 years old who do not have immediate access to Pfizer should reassess the benefits to them and their contacts of being vaccinated with the COVID-19 AstraZeneca vaccine versus the rare risk of a side effect. So put simply, you should get AstraZeneca because the cases are starting to rack up. So ultimately, the advice is exactly the same advice as before we even had a vaccine to be able to give to people in Australia. See your doctor first. Use their advice, then book in. But as the polls have shown us time and time again, one of the many reasons why people have not rushed to get the vaccine is because the advice around the vaccine keeps changing. It's not the government that keeps changing its mind about it, it's the advice to government. Advice that is often released without the government's prior knowledge. So they are acting in real time to overcautiousness from this group ATAGI. So I repeat, if nothing else, think of this scenario. 9 million people have got the vaccine thus far, but not 9,000 people who've died that would make the 9 million 25 million yesterday. I'll take that.